Sir, keep your hands where I can see them.
I'm not moving. My hands are up.
Back up, right there. Don't reach for anything.
I'm cooperating. Please stay calm.
Hey, we're filming this.
The car door opened. Officer Darren McKee's voice cut through the suburban calm, a direct command. Sir, keep your hands where I can see them. Step out of the vehicle. Antoine Reich, maintaining a calculated calm, had just denied consent for a search. He had adhered to every legal guideline, yet McKee's hand was now on the car door, pulling it open. You can't do that! Antoine's voice rose, the first clear break in his composure. A small crowd began to gather. Phones were raised, capturing the confrontation. Into his radio, McKee declared, "We've got a non-compliant suspect refusing a lawful search." It was a critical misrepresentation. The body camera knew it. And in that pivotal moment, a routine traffic stop in a quiet, affluent neighborhood began its transformation into a public spectacle of perceived injustice, already destined for viral condemnation. It was precisely 4:12 p.m. in West Haven, an upscale suburb where meticulously manicured lawns frame generally tranquil streets. Officer Darren McKee, 2 hours into his patrol, noticed a black SUV. The vehicle had rolled through a four-way stop, a minor infraction, perhaps accompanied by a subtle, suspicious lane change. Something about it, however, prompted McKee to tap his brakes and execute a U-turn. He communicated a suspicious lane change to dispatch. His cruiser's flashing red and blue lights illuminated the brick facades as Antoine Reich, a black man in his early 40s, promptly pulled to the curb. Antoine's actions were precise and unhurried. His hands remained conspicuously placed on the steering wheel. The driver's side window descended slowly. McKee approached the SUV with palpable tension, one hand resting on his belt, the other hovering near his holstered weapon. His voice was tight as he requested license and registration. Antoine, unflustered, politely sought permission before retrieving the documents from his glove compartment. McKee responded with a silent nod, allowing the tense quiet to settle. The identification and registration proved valid. No outstanding warrants, no flags, no irregularities. Yet, McKee's posture did not relax. His gaze lingered inside the vehicle, systematically scanning the rear seats. He took a sharp, audible breath. "Hang tight," he muttered, retreating to his cruiser. What the officer failed to realize at this exact moment was how quickly this seemingly routine encounter was about to spiral beyond his control, trapping him within a predetermined narrative he couldn't escape. McKee returned, his stance rigid, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" he demanded. This was not a routine inquiry about residents, but a pointed challenge to Antoine's very presence. Antoine replied evenly, "Driving home from work." McKee offered no acknowledgement. He leaned in closer, his eyes still sweeping the interior. "You've been drinking?" "No, sir." "Any drugs in the car?" "No, sir." Then came the decisive question. "Mind if I take a look?" Antoine's response was measured, yet firm. "Actually, yes, I do mind. I don't consent to a search." This clear assertion of his constitutional rights fundamentally shifted the dynamic of the stop. McKee's facial muscles tightened. "You sure about that?" Antoine affirmed with a polite nod. "Yes, officer, I know my rights." McKee paused, then took a deliberate step back from the vehicle. His next words were not an appeal, but an unambiguous command. "I smell something. Step out of the vehicle." Antoine hesitated, not out of defiance, but in a moment of calculation. He was familiar with this tactic. He switched off the engine, unbuckled his seatbelt, and exited the car slowly, his hands clearly visible, demonstrating full compliance. He then raised his phone, stating, "I'm recording this." McKee's body camera was already active, but now the public lens on the situation intensified. Neighbors had emerged from their homes, some also capturing the scene on their phones. McKee's frustration with the escalating attention was evident. "Back away from the vehicle," he barked. Antoine complied, but his gaze remained steady, his voice calm. "You said you smelled something. What exactly do you think is in my car?" McKee conspicuously ignored the question. Instead, he radioed for backup, loudly announcing, "We've got a non-compliant suspect refusing a lawful search." This false declaration, broadcast for all to hear and captured on multiple cameras, wasn't just a tactical move. It was the spark that would ignite a media firestorm, one that would consume McKee long before the true implications were even visible. Antoine stood with his palms open, his phone still recording. "I'm not resisting. I've cooperated fully." The tension on the street was thick, almost static. What began as a questionable traffic stop was now overtly escalating. The second unit had not yet arrived, but McKee proceeded without waiting. He issued a final ultimatum. "Last chance. Do you consent to a vehicle search?" Antoine's reply was immediate and consistent. "I already said no." That refusal, by legal standard, should have brought the encounter to a close. It did not. McKee walked directly to the driver's side door and opened it anyway. No warrant, no probable cause, no consent. Only a badge and the undeniable arrogance of ignoring the very laws he was sworn to uphold. "You can't do that," Antoine protested, his voice now clearly agitated. McKay's body camera captured it all, a plain, deliberate, and illegal act. To the growing crowd, it looked precisely as similar incidents had always looked. Another officer escalating, another black man's rights violated. The public narrative was already rapidly cementing itself. Ignoring Antoine's protest, McKee moved to the trunk. He popped it open and began to survey the contents. His hand rested on a black duffel bag. He slowly unzipped it, expecting routine items, gym clothes, perhaps tools. What he found instead brought him to an immediate stunned halt. Inside was a hard case, emblazoned with the stark label, "Property of DOJ sealed." Next to it, a zippered pouch containing multiple USB drives and several manila folders, bound with rubber bands, each labeled with first names and what appeared to be dates. Still, these could potentially be work-related. But then he retrieved a small, clear plastic sleeve. Inside, he found 4 driver's licenses. Different names, but all bearing the same distinct face. It's Antoine Reichs. One from Ohio, another from Nevada. All appeared legitimate, yet deeply unsettling. McKee's breathing quickened noticeably. His voice dropped, suddenly urgent. "Dispatch," he said quietly. "I need a supervisor at my location. Immediately." The officer had just made a profound, unlawful error. But what he held in his hand would soon reveal that the perceived victim of that error was anything but innocent. The story, it seemed, was about to flip entirely. Sergeant Delaney's cruiser arrived 10 minutes later, pulling up to the scene. She immediately registered the stunned, almost disbelieving expression on Officer McKee's face before he uttered a single word. Without explanation, McKee handed her the sealed case, the stack of USB drives, and the 4 driver's licenses. Delaney, with a grim efficiency, opened the manila folders. What she saw twisted her stomach. It wasn't merely names and dates. There were headshots of young people, some visibly in their early teens. Accompanying these were shorthand notes, GPS coordinates, and grainy surveillance images. One folder contained printouts of online conversations, social media screenshots, and disturbingly explicit private messages. Delaney slowly closed the folder, her gaze lifted, sharp and direct, meeting McKee's. "Where did you find this?" she asked. McKee gestured vaguely towards the open duffel bag in the trunk. I searched the car," he admitted, his voice low. He didn't give consent, but something just felt off. Delaney's expression hardened. "You realize this was an unlawful search, right?" McKee nodded, a man who understood far too late that his impulsive action had just entangled him in something exponentially larger than his badge. Antoine Reich, still calmly standing on the curb, his phone recording, asked, "Is there a problem?" His voice level and composed. What McKee had stumbled upon was not just evidence, but a gateway into a meticulously hidden horror, a truth far removed from the public narrative already forming. McKee didn't respond to Antoine. Sergeant Delaney walked over instead. "Sir," she began, her tone formal and deliberate, "we're going to need to detain you for questioning. You're not under arrest at this time, but we need to secure the evidence." Antoine didn't resist. He didn't protest. He simply slipped his phone into his pocket and turned around, offering his hands behind his back. He seemed almost prepared for this moment. As the handcuffs clicked shut, the palpable energy on the street shifted entirely. This was no longer just about an officer overstepping. This was something darker, something profoundly unsettling. The bystanders who had been filming grew quiet, their whispers reflecting confusion. "What's going on?" one woman asked. "Why aren't they letting him go?" another echoed. For now, there were no easy answers. McKee stood to the side, his eyes fixed on the pavement. He was no longer concerned with racial optics or policy violations. His thoughts were consumed by the sheer weight of what he had found, and its chilling implications. The internet had already cast its verdict, but the contents of those folders whispered a completely different, horrifying truth. In the heavy silence of the police cruiser, Antoine Rique sat handcuffed, yet remarkably calm, his eyes fixed forward. He appeared accustomed to waiting things out. McKee remained outside, while Sergeant Delaney began to run Antoine's identification through her laptop. "Antoine Marcus Rique," she read aloud, providing a date of birth in the late 1970s. The dispatcher on the other end of the line hesitated, a pause longer than normal, then escalated the call for supervisor access. This was never a good sign. A different voice returned, its tone and cadence distinct. "We're accessing sealed records. Please confirm location and detainment status." Delaney glanced at McKee, confirming the subject was detained and evidence was secured. "Repeat. Sealed records," she pressed. "Yes," the voice crackled back. "Sealed juvenile file out of Louisiana. Adult convictions in Texas, pled down. Multiple aliases flagged by DHS in Nevada and Georgia. He was on parole until 2019. Offenses involve contact with minors. Files were suppressed following a plea agreement, confirming known aliases." Every word delivered was like a jolt of ice water. Delaney's eyes narrowed. Why wasn't he flagged at initial license scan? The answer was blunt. "Used a clean alias. The ID isn't fake, but the name is. Driver's license linked to a legal change filed in 2020 under sealed order. Only federal access would have triggered it." Every piece of new information was another layer peeling back on a meticulously constructed deception, revealing a depth of criminality that defied casual detection. Antoine Rique had meticulously scrubbed himself from the system, just well enough to circumvent standard police detection, but not well enough to remain invisible forever. McKee leaned against his cruiser, arms folded, staring blankly at the asphalt, as if it had betrayed him. He felt no vindication. Instead, a chilling realization crept over him. His impulsive, unlawful traffic stop had uncovered something immense, something truly monstrous. Yet, the very method he used to uncover it might, ironically, unravel everything. Delaney closed her laptop with a soft thud and muttered, "Jesus Christ!" Antoine's persistent calm was not bravado. It was the calculated composure of a man who had played this dangerous game before. This time, however, he had lost, and the department, caught flat-footed, was utterly unprepared for the escalating fallout. The narrative was no longer a simple case about civil rights or racial profiling. It had morphed into the story of a man who had quietly, effectively, slipped through every crack in the system until one questionable traffic stop by one reckless officer dragged everything into the harsh glare of an uncomfortable light. What was once a clear-cut case of police misconduct now spiraled into a moral and legal quagmire, challenging every assumption and leaving a systemic question mark hanging over the very concept of justice. The clip hit the internet at 6:13 p.m. It was a shaky 90-second phone video posted to Twitter by a woman across the street. The context was absent. The explanation was missing. All that remained were the stark optics. A white officer verbally challenging a calm, well-dressed black man during a traffic stop in an affluent suburb. The video did not show McKee's unlawful search. It omitted the duffel bag, the folders, the USB drives, and the fake IDs. It ended precisely as Antoine stepped out of the car, hands raised, and McKee reached for his cuffs. That was all the internet required. By 7 p.m., the clip had garnered over 600,000 views. By 9 p.m., West Haven stop was trending nationwide. The captions wrote themselves, "Here we go again, driving while black. another power-tripping cop harasses an innocent man. Activists, influencers, and civil rights attorneys rapidly shared the clip. They didn't wait for facts. They didn't need to. The image was agonizingly familiar. At this point, the digital storm was already too powerful to contain, fueled by a narrative that had solidified faster than any official truth could hope to emerge. Local news channels picked up the story by 10 p.m. National news outlets followed by midnight. The mayor's office released a vague statement referencing community values and a commitment to transparency. Before dawn, protesters gathered outside the West Haven Police Department. They carried handmade signs, chanted demands for accountability, and someone brazenly spray-painted "McKee equals racist" on the station's front steps. Inside the department, the mood was one of escalating panic. The full body camera footage had not yet been reviewed. The sealed evidence was still being processed. The department's public information officer had no coherent answers, only a rapidly viral clip and a name: Officer Darren McKee. By noon, McKee was formally placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. No pay, no official statement of support, just silence. He offered no protest. He spoke no words. He understood the game. In the court of public opinion, he had already been tried and convicted. The true bombshell was still locked away in the cruiser's trunk, but the digital verdict had already been delivered, sealing McKee's public fate with irreversible speed. What no one outside the department yet knew, what hadn't leaked into the public domain, was the explosive content in the cruiser's trunk. The folders, the IDs, the drives, and the federal case that was only just beginning to surface. But in the digital age, perception outran reality by miles. By the time the actual truth eventually emerged, it might not matter at all. The next morning, Darren McKee's name was inescapable. It wasn't just in headlines, it permeated comments, online threads, and furious social media posts. His badge number, his home address, even the Facebook profile of his wife Melissa were circulating. Photos of his children, initially blurred, then starkly clear, began to appear. He was being tried in the only courtroom that didn't demand evidence: the internet. And the verdict, for all intents and purposes, had already been decided. The personal cost of this digital trial began to manifest in terrifying, immediate ways. His family's home phone rang non-stop. The voicemails filled with slurs, threats, and screams. Someone sent a pizza to their house with a chilling note: "Choke on it, pig." Melissa's phone was flooded with messages, some feigning pity, but most venomous. "How does it feel to sleep next to a racist? Tell your kids their dad ruined a man's life." The school district called Melissa at 11:42 a.m., advising her that both children were being kept in the office for their safety. By the end of the day, she had pulled them out of school entirely. The mayor, flanked by community leaders and local clergy, held a press conference. "We are horrified by what we've seen," he declared. "Officer McKee's behavior is under full investigation. We stand with our black residents and condemn all forms of racial profiling." The police department also issued a statement, but conspicuously, it offered no support for McKee. Officer McKee's actions are not representative of our values. No one mentioned the sealed evidence. No one hinted at the investigation still unfolding behind the scenes. On television, pundits called for sweeping police reform. "This is why we need civilian oversight. Qualified immunity must go." The video, cropped and edited to fit a pre-existing narrative, became a relentless loop, driving the public fury deeper, while the actual events remained stubbornly hidden. The viral video ran on a continuous loop across news channels, accompanied by dramatic music, slow-motion replays, and expert commentary. Crucially, it was always cut just before the illegal search began, always ending at the moment that served the prevailing narrative best. McKee, following legal advice, remained silent. He avoided media contact, refrained from posting online, and offered no explanations. But silence, in this accelerating digital age, was not a shield. It was gasoline poured onto an already raging fire. The online mob filled in the blanks with fury and fiction. Some falsely claimed he had drawn his weapon. Others asserted Antoine was violently dragged from the car. None of it was true. Yet, that reality held no sway. In a world where likes and shares propagated faster than verified facts, the only currency that truly mattered was outrage, and it was now omnipresent, consuming everything in its path. The chasm between public perception and hidden reality grew wider with every repost, every comment, solidifying a false truth that would prove devastatingly difficult to undo. 3 days after the initial video went viral, facing immense public pressure, the department's Internal Affairs Unit released the full body camera footage. What they anticipated as a routine compliance move, intended to temper public outrage, instead unleashed a bombshell revelation. The footage began precisely as the viral clip had shown. Flashing lights, McKee's aggressive tone, Antoine's unwavering calm. But then, the video continued, pushing past the moment of cuffing, past the point where the internet had already formed its judgment. What came next stunned every single person who watched it. The footage undeniably showed the illegal search. Yet, it also captured McKee's visible shock as he uncovered the sealed DOJ case file, the burner phones, and the array of fake IDs. His breathing visibly changed. His voice dropped, thick with a new kind of tension. Then came the folders themselves, faces of minors, explicit locations, and digital drives that would later be confirmed to contain material classified under federal child exploitation statutes. None of this had been seen publicly until this moment. The very evidence intended to condemn the officer now served as an unexpected, horrifying twist, completely upending the widely accepted narrative. Alongside the full body cam footage, the police department released a joint statement from the FBI. It confirmed that Antoine Reich had been under active investigation for months. The traffic stop, while undeniably unauthorized in its method, had unintentionally exposed critical evidence that drastically fast-tracked a multi-state trafficking probe. The USB drives recovered from Antoine's vehicle were matched to open case files spanning Georgia, Nevada, and Texas. Names listed within the folders correlated directly to known missing persons reports. Some of the files were coded, others were explicitly sickening in their content. Antoine wasn't merely hiding under the radar. He was actively operating a sophisticated criminal enterprise under multiple aliases, protected by loopholes and sealed records. His primary identification was clean, only because it had been legally changed through official channels after a previous plea deal. He was no mere ghost, he was a sophisticated shapeshifter. And McKee, despite his egregious procedural violation, had, by sheer accident, uncovered something monstrously real. The media scrambled, caught flat-footed by a truth that defied their initial, simplified narrative. Some news outlets immediately ran the full, unedited body camera tape. Others, however, stubbornly doubled down on their original, damning coverage. Commentators, visibly uncomfortable, began to backpedal, blaming incomplete information for their earlier conclusions. The mayor's office issued a rapid clarification. The police union, which had remained conspicuously silent, now released a statement squarely in defense of McKee. The evidence, they declared, changes the context significantly. But for Darren McKee, the profound damage had already been done. His face was irrevocably burned into the nation's memory as the racist cop, long before anyone knew the true identity of the man he had actually pulled over. And now, the unvarnished truth was finally public. The traffic stop itself may have been unlawful, a clear policy violation. But the man behind the wheel was unequivocally far from innocent. The shifting tide of public opinion was not a wave of vindication, but a slow, reluctant retreat from an easily embraced yet ultimately false outrage. The press conference was scheduled for noon. By 11:30, the lobby of the West Haven Municipal Building was packed with reporters, cameras, and a palpable silent tension. The police chief stood at the podium, flanked by an FBI liaison and the city's legal counsel. Notably absent were the mayor and any city council members who had previously and vociferously called for McKee's termination. What followed was not an apology. It was a meticulously calculated shift in official messaging. The body cam footage tells a more complete story than initially reported, the chief began, his voice devoid of emotion. While Officer McKee's decision to conduct a warrantless search was a serious policy violation, The subsequent discovery of federal-level evidence tied to an ongoing child exploitation investigation reframes the nature of the incident entirely. Behind him, still frames from the full footage appeared on the large screen. The folders, the fake IDs, the USB drives. One photo showed the duffel bag, chillingly open in the trunk. No accompanying commentary. Just the stark visual weight of a horrifying reality. The outrage machine, so quick to condemn, now struggled with a truth too complex for its simple binary. Public opinion slowly began to shift. But this shift lacked the velocity, the ferocity, that had so swiftly condemned McKee just days earlier. There were no viral hashtags defending him. No trending topics proclaiming he was right. Only quiet retractions and hesitant, half-hearted editorials admitting that new information complicates initial assumptions. Some of the loudest online critics simply deleted their original furious posts without explanation. The same media outlets that had so fiercely scorched McKee's name now walked their stories back with a fraction of their initial fervor. They used carefully chosen phrases like emerging evidence and ongoing investigation. No one uttered the words, "We got it wrong." No one admitted, "We ruined this man's life in 48 hours." The court of public opinion, it seemed, did not possess a correction column. As for the general public, some were relieved, others remained angry, and many simply didn't know how to feel. The story had flipped too fast. The narrative turning inside out. The cognitive dissonance was profoundly real. A cop who undeniably violated procedure had, against all odds, stopped a predator. A black man, initially profiled, was in fact far from innocent. Nothing fit into clean, easily digestible lines anymore. But one thing was tragically clear. Darren McKee's name would never mean the same thing again. Not in this town, not online, not anywhere. The justice system had finally brought its weight to bear, but the parallel court of public perception had already delivered its irreversible sentence. 3 weeks after the full body cam footage was released, the federal indictment against Antoine Reich was unsealed. He faced 11 counts, including possession of child pornography, identity fraud, conspiracy to exploit minors, and interstate trafficking with intent to distribute exploitative materials. The DOJ press release confirmed that McKee's traffic stop, despite its unlawful initiation, had critically accelerated an investigation already months in motion. The materials found in the duffel bag precisely matched data from open cases across 4 states. Victim recovery efforts were now actively underway. The evidence was overwhelming. Aliases linked to online accounts used to lure minors, encrypted chat logs, and geotagged photos on the USB drives, and one ID belonging to a man listed as deceased in another state. Another alias had been used to rent vehicles that crossed state lines near reported missing persons cases. What McKee had stumbled upon was not circumstantial. It was a terrifying, calculated window into a deeply disturbing criminal enterprise. The formal legal system had finally caught up. But for McKee, the quiet, corrosive aftermath was just beginning. McKee, meanwhile, returned to the department, not with ceremony, but through the mundane process of paperwork. No one shook his hand, no one offered a welcoming word. His locker had been mistakenly emptied, his email account deactivated due to an oversight. The chief met with him privately, explaining the immense pressure the department was under from both sides of the public divide. "You can come back," the chief stated, "but don't expect a parade." He didn't. And he didn't stay long either. 2 months after his reinstatement, McKee filed a defamation suit against 3 national media outlets, 2 local journalists, and 1 nonprofit that had published a now-deleted Cop Watch alert, falsely accusing him of brutality. His legal team didn't argue that the search had been lawful. It unequivocally hadn't. But that the reporting had presented an edited narrative with reckless disregard for the unfolding facts. Internal emails and publication timestamps proved they had received the full footage before deliberately choosing to publish selectively. 3 of the 6 parties settled quietly. Undisclosed amounts, no formal apologies, just signatures and silence. The money didn't mend what was broken, but it provided an exit, a quiet, unceremonious escape from a system that had both broken and defined him. McKee didn't post about the settlements. He didn't gloat. But he also didn't forget. The financial compensation didn't fix the profound damage inflicted, but it funded his exit strategy. He filed his retirement paperwork 6 weeks after the last settlement, opting for an early pension and strict confidentiality clauses. It was a clean exit from a job that had once defined him and nearly destroyed him. The original headlines didn't update. The furious Twitter threads never issued corrections. But the official record, buried deep within a courthouse database, told the truth. Darren McKee had made a bad call, and yet he had stopped a monster. The story faded from the immediate headlines, as they always do. Another scandal took its place. Another outrage filled the digital feed. But beneath the churning surface of daily news, this particular case left a lingering ache, a quiet, unresolved discomfort. Not just about what happened to McKee, but what almost didn't happen at all. The true haunting question wasn't about the officer's actions, but the terrifying consequences of what would have happened if he had chosen to follow the rules. What if McKee hadn't searched the car? What if, frustrated by a lack of probable cause and fearing another internal complaint, he had simply sent Antoine Reich on his way? No search, no folders, no discovery, no FBI involvement. The duffel bag would have remained closed, the drives untouched, the names of missing children undocumented, their faces fading into cold files and broken families. All because a cop followed the rules and let the devil walk free. The thought haunted everyone involved. Even those who had initially called for McKee's head now asked themselves silently and without tweets, did we almost protect a predator in the name of justice? Because this wasn't just about one man or one incident. It was about the culture, a culture that demands instant conclusions from 30-second clips. One that prioritizes appearance over process and outrage over careful verification. We built a world where any image can be weaponized, any context ignored, and any truth delayed until it no longer matters. Outrage is easy, nuance is hard. The system, built for clear-cut villains and heroes, found itself collapsing under the weight of an uncomfortable, morally ambiguous reality. Some civil rights groups quietly admitted that the case had complicated implications. Some activists walked back their earlier posts, while others doubled down, arguing that McKee still violated protocol and should have faced discipline. They weren't wrong, but they weren't entirely right either. The deeper question remained, how many Reichs are out there, shielded not by clever aliases or legal loopholes, but by a system now terrified to act, to search, to question, to intervene? How many officers, burned by the brutal backlash against McKee, choose silence over instinct, adherence to protocol over intervening on a gut feeling? When justice is preempted by virality, we risk creating two distinct kinds of victims: the ones we tragically overlook, and the ones we punish for getting it right, albeit the wrong way. This story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. In a world driven by instant outrage, the most complex questions are often the first to be ignored. Darren McKee submitted his resignation exactly 6 months to the day after the traffic stop. No press conference, no farewell interview, no send-off. Just a quietly signed letter, a cleared-out locker, and a name still whispered in every briefing room like a warning. He didn't leave because he was ashamed. He left because he understood something the rest of the world refused to say out loud. The system wasn't built to survive this kind of contradiction. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a villain. He was both, depending on which part of the video you chose to believe. He broke protocol, but he uncovered a predator. He violated one man's rights to protect a dozen others. He was condemned before the truth came out, and by the time it did, the damage was irreversible. The public had moved on. The outrage had cooled. The apologies never came. He got to walk away. Antoine Reich didn't. But the real loss wasn't just a job. It was a system that couldn't admit it got something partially wrong and partially right at the same time. This story will be used by different people for different purposes. Some will cite it as proof that over-policing targets black men. Others will use it to justify illegal searches in the name of gut instinct. Both will miss the point. Because the real question isn't about one traffic stop. It's about every system, legal, cultural, digital, that buckles under complexity, that demands immediate answers, that trades due process for public performance. How do we hold officers accountable without assuming guilt from a thumbnail? How do we protect civil rights without protecting those who weaponize them? How do we balance outrage with evidence, race with facts, instincts with laws? How do we balance accountability with fairness for everyone involved? If you've made it this far, ask yourself this. When the next video drops, when the next name trends, when the next narrative surges ahead of the truth, will we have learned anything at all?